Why did the base alarm sound that morning when no orders had been given? Why did a jet scream into the sky as if ghosts themselves were piloting it? And why, when the canopy opened, did the world glimpse the face of a woman who was supposed to be dead? They would not know the answer, not yet. At 4:30 a.m., the alarm clock screamed in the dark silence of a forgotten trailer park on the edge of county. A woman stirred. Her name, at least the one the world knew, was Sarah Mitchell. She rolled out of the narrow bed, her feet touching the cold linoleum floor without sound. Silence had become her skill, her survival. She was 42, though her body still carried the muscle memory of a fighter pilot. Broad shoulders but lean, her movements efficient, mechanical. Years of manual labor had stained her hands with hydraulic oil and engine grease. No one looking at those hands would believe they once pulled the stick of an FA-18 Super Hornet, cutting across the sky with lethal precision. She dressed in the dark, worn coveralls, a jacket heavy with the smell of fuel and metal. She glanced once into the cracked bathroom mirror, and the reflection staring back at her was not the woman she used to be. 8 years ago, that face had been on magazine covers. She had been Lieutenant Commander Cat, Blue Angel hero, the only woman to ever pull off the legendary miracle of Mobile Bay. A feat that saved hundreds of lives and earned her the Navy Cross. Now she was invisible, a maintenance supervisor at Pensacola Naval Air Station, a ghost who had perfected the art of not being seen. Outside, the trailer park sat in stillness, Spanish moss swaying in the dawn wind. Her neighbors were the forgotten ones, retirees on fixed incomes, oil rig workers who came and went, men and women who asked no questions. And Sarah, living in Lot 47, fit in perfectly. No one asked where she came from. No one knew she was supposed to be lying in a grave less than 3 miles away. Her morning never varied. Coffee, black, bitter, strong enough to burn her throat. Then the 5-mile run, her boots pounding the cracked sidewalks of Pensacola. She always slowed at one particular grave in the National Cemetery. Section 42. A simple white marble headstone. Elizabeth, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. 1982-2016. She gave her life in service to freedom. Sarah would stand there, staring, knowing the words were lies, hadn't died. She had been erased. The body in that grave was a Jane Doe from the county morgue, sacrificed to create the illusion of her death, buried under orders from men who wanted her silenced, men who had destroyed her reputation and branded her a traitor. She jogged on, the Gulf of Mexico breaking into amber and rose under the rising sun. Pensacola Naval Air Station glowed in the distance, its runways stretching like scars across the waterfront. The birthplace of naval aviation, a place where careers soared and crumbled. By 6 a.m. she was back at the base, another ordinary worker in coveralls, another ID badge scanned at the gate, another face a young Marine guard didn't bother to study. If he had looked closely, he might have noticed the 1,000-yard stare, the predator's awareness of every shadow, every sound. But nobody ever looked that closely at Sarah Mitchell. Inside Hangar 7, engines coughed awake. Pneumatic tools hissed. Voices shouted over steel and concrete. Sarah's crew kept aircraft alive. Coast Guard helicopters, lumbering transport planes, and sometimes the sleek blue and gold FA-18s of the Navy's pride, the Blue Angels. She avoided those assignments. For 8 years she had dodged them, made excuses, found ways to be absent whenever her old squadron returned home, but fate, it seemed, had run out of patience. "Mitchell," a voice barked. Chief Petty Officer Tank approached, clipboard in hand. 30 years Navy, a man who respected competence above all else. She slid out from beneath the cowling of a Coast Guard, wiping grease on an old rag. "What's the situation, Chief?" His tone carried a weight that meant trouble. "Gulf Coast thunder's coming." She froze. The biggest aviation exhibition in the Southeast, 80th anniversary of the Blue Angels. 50,000 people, international press, every military leader worth naming. And, she asked carefully, and your team's been tagged for Blue Angel support, full maintenance, pre-flight checks, ground handling, and they want a dedicated liaison, someone who knows Super Hornets inside and out. The irony was brutal. Sarah had once written the very technical manuals Blue Angel studied. She had flown those jets to their limits, bled in them, nearly died in them. When do they arrive? She asked. 3 days. Squadron's commander is Lieutenant Commander Jake, youngest pilot ever picked for the team, son of a Medal of Honor recipient. Paused. His old man died in 16, classified op. Kid's been carrying that weight ever since. The year hit her like a strike to the chest. 2016. The year she had died. The year Captain Michael Iceman had been silenced. A man who had been her ally and the one who paid the price for standing too close to the truth. You okay, Mitchell? She forced a breath, forced her voice steady. Fine, Chief, just thinking through logistics. I'll review updated protocols. Protocols she had written. Procedures burned into her hands, her muscles, her memory. Nodded, satisfied. That's why I wanted you. You always seem ahead of the curve. He walked away. Sarah leaned against this bulk, her heart pounding. 8 years she had hidden, 8 years pretending. And now the Blue Angels were coming back to Pensacola with the son of the man who had died trying to save her. That night in her trailer, she sat at her kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of her, her eyes on the closet door. Inside, beneath a loose floorboard, lay a sealed container, her Navy cross, her flight wings, a photograph of her beside her FA-18, and a letter, Captain's last, smuggled to her 3 days after his death. A warning, a map for how to disappear. She had followed every instruction. She had erased, become Sarah Mitchell, a nobody, a ghost. But ghosts don't stay hidden forever. The next morning, Chief returned with an update. Blue Angels are arriving early, and Commander specifically requested our best maintenance supervisor as his liaison. That means you, Mitchell. Her world tilted. Personal liaison. One-on-one with Jake, the son of the man whose blood was on the same conspiracy's hands. When do I brief him? Tomorrow morning, 800 sharp. She swallowed hard, understood. Studied her. You sure you're up for this? It's not routine. If only he knew. She forced a thin smile. I can handle it, Chief. Why did he look at her like that? Why did his eyes linger longer than they should have, as if some hidden memory was stirring? And why, when he said her name, did it feel less like an introduction and more like recognition? Sarah held her breath, but on the surface she was calm. The art of invisibility had kept her alive for 8 years. Now it would be tested in ways she had never imagined. Glad to be here, Lieutenant Commander Jake said, voice steady, professional. Yet beneath the practiced composure she caught something else. Weariness. A heaviness, as if his uniform carried more than just rank. Your team comes highly recommended, he continued. I'll be counting on you. Yes, sir, Sarah replied. We'll keep your aircraft mission ready. But Jake wasn't finished. His eyes narrowed, his tone softened. You've been here since 2016, haven't you? The question cut through her. The date hung between them like a blade. 2016, the year her name was carved into stone, the year his father died, the year ceased to exist. She forced herself to nod. Yes, sir, 8 years. Jake studied her with a pilot's eyes, sharp, calculating. He wasn't looking at Sarah Mitchell, the maintenance supervisor. He was searching for something beneath the surface, some shadow she thought she had buried. Finally, he broke the silence. Interesting year for naval aviation. Her pulse quickened. Was it casual remark, or was he probing, pushing, waiting for her to slip? She gave nothing. Yes, sir. Jake's smile was polite but distant. Have the status reports ready by 1400. I want every aircraft inspected before our first practice flight. Yes, sir. He walked away, but Sarah felt his eyes on her long after he disappeared into the hangar. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of engines, hydraulic lines, checklists, and shouted instructions. Sarah's team worked with practiced efficiency, and yet every task dragged her deeper into the past. Touching the skin of an FA-18 was like touching a ghost. Her hands moved with instinct, muscle memory guiding her fingers across rivets and seams, reading the jet like an old friend's face. She could feel their condition in the vibrations of metal, hear it in the pitch of an engine's hum. It was dangerous, too familiar, too revealing. "Boss," a young mechanic called, petty officer, not the chief, but the junior she had trained these past 3 years. He pointed to the landing gear of the number 3 jet. "See this, where pattern's not standard. Outboard edge looks stressed." Sarah crouched, eyes narrowing. He was right. The wear was unusual, but to her it wasn't mysterious. It was the signature of precision flying. Aggressive crosswind landings. The kind of textbook precision that Blue Angels demanded. "It's normal," she said. "Demonstration profiles do this. Pilots pushing exact touchdown control." Nodded impressed, but someone else had heard. Jake stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. "Impressive analysis," he said, his tone neutral. Too neutral. Most maintenance supervisors wouldn't notice wear patterns like that. Sarah straightened, her mind racing. She had given too much away, too much knowledge too fast. "I study performance effects," she said carefully. "Different mission profiles leave different signatures, helps anticipate maintenance." Jake's gaze sharpened. "And where did you study demonstration flying characteristics?" The question wasn't casual, it was a test, a probe. Sarah held his stare. "Manuals, publications, professional development courses, sir." Each word true, but incomplete, a truth so narrow it became its own kind of lie. Jake nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't soften. If anything, they hardened. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They moved together along the row of parked jets, the smell of jet fuel sharp in the air. Mechanics worked around them, but Sarah felt isolated, exposed. Jake asked questions, technical ones, probing ones, and every answer she gave only seemed to sharpen his suspicion. Finally he stopped, turned to face her directly. "Mitchell," he said quietly, "do you know who Lieutenant Commander was?" The world seemed to stop. Sarah's heart pounded. She had rehearsed this moment for 8 years, and still nothing could prepare her for hearing her real name spoken aloud. She forced her voice steady. "Blue Angel pilot, court-martialed in 2016, died in an accident before proceedings were complete." "That's the official story," Jake said softly. His eyes locked onto hers, searching, drilling past every layer she had built. "But my father didn't believe it. He thought she was innocent. He thought she was framed." Her breath caught. "My father died 3 days after he started asking questions about," Jake continued. "Everyone who supported her story was silenced, retired, transferred, or worse." He leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "And then, 8 years later, I meet you. A woman who knows these jets like she designed them herself." The accusation hung between them, a live wire ready to burn. Sarah felt the walls of her false life closing in. She could deny it, keep hiding, protect the lie. But instead she felt something else, relief. 8 years of silence, 8 years of pretending, 8 years of carrying the truth alone, and here now someone else was asking to share the weight. "What exactly are you asking me, sir?" she whispered. Jake glanced around the hangar. His voice was low but steady. I'm asking if you're ready to help me finish what my father started." The words slammed into her like turbulence at 30,000 feet. For the first time in 8 years, she felt the mask of Sarah Mitchell begin to crack. That night Sarah drove past the base, past the neon glow of bars and gas stations, past the slow hum of Pensacola traffic. She turned toward Bay, the abandoned section of base housing. Forgotten streets, shuttered homes, a ghost town. At 2100, Jake was waiting under a broken streetlight. No uniform now, jeans, a navy sweatshirt, younger, human, but his eyes carried his father's same resolve. "Before we start," Sarah said, standing in the shadows, "I need to know how you knew." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside, photographs. In flight suit, laughing with squadron members, briefing, standing beside her FA-18. "When I saw you 3 days ago," Jake said, "something felt familiar. Tonight I compared those photos. The hair's different, the weight's different. The way you carry yourself is different, but the eyes," he paused. "The eyes are the same." Her chest tightened. He said, "my father died trying to prove it." The silence between them stretched long. Sarah could feel her heartbeat in her throat, her breath coming in shallow waves. And then finally she let go. "Yes," she said softly, "I'm." Jake exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. For him it was vindication. For her it was release. "My father was right," Jake said. "You were framed." "They killed him because he got too close," whispered. Speaking her real name felt strange, heavy, alive. "The same people who destroyed me destroyed him. He tried to save me." Jake's fists clenched. His voice was low, trembling with restrained anger. 8 years I've wondered if his death was an accident. 8 years of lies, but now I know. He was murdered. "Yes," said, "and if we don't act, they'll do it again." Jake leaned forward, his face etched with determination. "Then we don't hide, we fight together." For the first time in years, felt something she thought she had lost. Hope. But hope was dangerous, because war had just found her again. What do you do when the mask you've worn for 8 years shatters? When someone speaks your true name out loud and the lie you've lived collapses in silence? Do you run? Or do you finally face the truth you've been burying? No longer Sarah Mitchell, not in her own heart, sat across from Jake in the abandoned base housing. The broken streetlight above flickered. Shadows bent across his face, but his eyes were clear, sharp, alive with purpose. He wasn't asking her to explain. He was asking her to fight. "You said they killed your father because he got too close," Jake whispered. "Then tell me, what did he find?" Hesitated. The air was thick with ghosts. She hadn't spoken of this in 8 years, not to anyone. But the weight of silence was worse than the danger of truth. "It started with maintenance records," she said quietly. "Systems marked as replaced when they weren't. Weapons that didn't match flight logs. Data altered after missions. At first, I thought it was incompetence. Then I saw the pattern. Someone was falsifying records to cover unauthorized use of aircraft." Jake's jaw tightened. "For what?" "Smuggling," said. "Weapons, technology, secrets, sold through back channels, hidden inside the system we trusted." Jake's voice dropped lower. "And they framed you to cover it." "Yes, they used my access, my electronic signature, planted files in my quarters. They made me the scapegoat. A hero turned traitor overnight. It was neat, clean, believable." Jake's fists curled against his knees. "And my father?" "He started digging. He believed me. He thought if he could prove the frame, he could take the truth higher. He was building a case. And then," his voice broke, the memory searing. "3 days later, he was dead. Training accident. That's what they called it. But it wasn't training. It was a message." Silence settled, broken only by the distant rush of waves against bay. Jake stood, packing. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady. "They murdered him, and they buried you. 8 years, 8 years of lies." Looked up at him. The resemblance to his father cut deep. The same fire, the same sense of duty. But there was something else, youth, urgency, the conviction of someone who hadn't yet been broken. "What are you going to do with the truth, Jake?" she asked softly. He turned, eyes burning. "Finish what he started." 2 nights later, sat in the corner booth of Earl's Diner. The kind of truck stop relic that smelled of coffee, grease, and 1,000 stories told at 2 a.m. she hadn't set foot there in years. The place hadn't changed, but she had. Across from her sat a woman who carried steel in her posture and storms in her eyes, Admiral Iron Eagle, retired, mentor, protector. The only reason had survived 8 years of exile. "You look older," said, studying her with a gaze that missed nothing. "But alive, that's what matters." "Thanks to you," replied. The Admiral leaned back, sipping her coffee. "Don't thank me yet. Survival was just chapter 1. You're about to step into chapter 2. Jake sat beside, posture respectful but his intensity clear. He had heard of anyone in naval aviation had, but stories didn't do her justice. She radiated authority even in civilian clothes. "Admiral," Jake said, "you knew my father." "Yes," replied. "He was one of the last good ones, brave enough to dig where others looked away, brave enough to die for it." Jake's jaw tightened, but he nodded. He'd already accepted it. His father's death wasn't fate, it was execution. "And now," continued, "we decide if that sacrifice meant anything." The waitress brought pie, hot plates sliding onto the table. To any passerby, they were just 3 tired travelers, but the documents on's lap held the power to bring down an empire. She opened the folder, spreading photographs and charts across the table, felt her breath catch. The conspiracy wasn't small. It wasn't a handful of corrupt officers. It was systemic, a network, defense contractors, admirals, politicians, lines of money and influence stretching like veins across decades. "This," said, tapping the chart, "is what destroyed you, what killed your father, Jake. This network has been bleeding the military for profit since before either of you were born." Jake leaned in, eyes scanning. "He's here, chairman of the Joint Chiefs." "Not just here," said grimly. "He's the architect. He built this machine in the 90s and he's been feeding it ever since. Weapons sales, technology leaks, defense contracts, billions stolen, and anyone who stood in the way." She let the silence finish the sentence. Stomach twisted. Her former commanding officer, the man who had smiled at her court-martial, who had looked her in the eye while signing the papers that erased her life. "He has everything now," whispered. "Power, access. He can bury anything." "Almost anything," corrected. Her eyes gleamed with a dangerous kind of resolve. "Not if we rip the truth into daylight. Not if we make it impossible to cover." Jake looked up. "How?" "The Gulf Coast Thunder exhibition," said. 50,000 people, international media, Congress, oversight committees, the perfect stage. If he's going to return from the dead, it must be then. Public, undeniable." Froze. The words hit her like a sudden G-force. "You want me to fly again?" Lips curved in the faintest smile. "Exactly. You don't clear your name with paperwork. You clear it with spectacle. You get back in the cockpit in front of the world and you prove you're alive. At the same moment we release the evidence." His chest tightened. The thought of sliding back into a Super Hornet's cockpit burned her with equal parts longing and terror. She hadn't flown in 8 years. She was officially dead. She had lived as a ghost. But ghosts don't fly. "Admiral," she said, "you're asking me to do the impossible." His gaze sharpened. "The impossible is exactly what you've always done." Later that night stood outside her trailer, staring at the base lights flickering in the distance. Her chest ached. Her mind raced. Should she? She had spent 8 years hiding, surviving, and yet every dream she had was still of flight. The roar of engines, the pull of sky, the dance of steel and instinct. She thought of Jake, his fire, his father's eyes staring back through him. He had lost everything twice, and still he stood, still he wanted to fight. If he could, why couldn't she? Her hands shook as she reached for the hidden container beneath her floorboard. She opened it. The wings lay there, her Navy cross, her past, compressed into metal and memory. She closed her eyes, whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time." The next day, she followed Admiral to a place hidden even from maps. An old hangar deep in the Florida pines, disguised as abandoned but meticulously maintained. The doors groaned open, and its breath caught. Inside, row upon row of warbirds gleamed under the lights. P-51 Mustangs, legends, ghosts of the Tuskegee, preserved, ready. "They're beautiful," whispered. "Their history," said a gravelly voice. An older man emerged from the shadows, his gait slow but steady. Burned scars on his arms, a lifetime in his eyes. "Earl Washington," he said, extending his hand. "Friends call me Grumpy." Shook his hand, feeling the strength still in his grip. Earl nodded toward the planes. "My grandfather flew one of these. Died for the same reason your father and Jake's did. He found the rot. They killed him for it." Stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Because I've spent 60 years tracking the same corruption," Earl said. He spread folders across a workbench, documents, photos, charts stretching back to World War II. "This isn't new. It's the same disease. Different faces, same betrayal. Your grandfather, my men, Captain, you, all casualties of the same machine." Felt dizzy. Her family's history, Jake's history, her own. All threads woven into the same tapestry of blood and silence. Earl's eyes gleamed. "You asked if you could fight. The answer is yes, but you don't just fight for yourself. You fight for all of them, every name buried because the truth was inconvenient." Stared at the documents, at the faces of ghosts. Her grandfather, Jake's father. Her own reflection staring back from 8-year-old photographs. And for the first time since 2016, she felt it. Resolve, sharp and burning. They thought she was dead. They thought they had erased her. But ghosts could rise. And was ready to fly again. What does it feel like to step back into the life you buried? To touch the controls you thought you'd never hold again? To breathe inside a cockpit that once defined you, when the world believes you're dead? For it felt like betrayal. Betrayal of the ghost she had built. Betrayal of Sarah Mitchell, the quiet mechanic who never drew attention. But as she stood inside Earl Washington's hidden hangar, staring at the warbirds gleaming like silver phantoms, another feeling rose too. Longing. Her fingers itched for a throttle. Her body remembered weightless rolls, afterburner climbs, the split-second instincts of survival. No matter how she had tried to erase it, flight was written into her blood. Earl watched her from the shadows, arms folded. "You want to touch one," he said, not as a question but as certainty. Exhaled. "It's been 8 years." Earl shrugged. "Then you're overdue." He handed her a helmet, not Navy issue, civilian, black, unmarked, stripped of insignia, a ghost's helmet. Her hand trembled as she took it. That night, under the cover of darkness, strapped into the cockpit of a P-51 Mustang. Not a Hornet. Not yet. That would come later if they survived this. Tonight was about muscle memory, instinct, trust in her body after years of silence. She closed her eyes, fingers sweeping across the controls. Everything felt both alien and familiar, like meeting an old friend after decades apart. The canopy sealed. Her breathing echoed in the helmet. The engine roared awake, shaking her bones. The hangar doors slid open, spilling moonlight onto the cracked runway hidden beneath the pines. Earl leaned against the doorway, his weathered face calm. "Let's see if you still remember how to dance." The Mustang rolled forward. Her hands gripped the stick. The runway stretched ahead. And then lift. The wheels left the earth, and for the first time in 8 years was airborne. The plane climbed, moonlight glinting off polished wings. She banked left, then right. Shallow turns at first, then sharper, testing limits. Her body adjusted instantly, like no time had passed. Her stomach rose and fell with each maneuver, but her instincts never wavered. She rolled inverted, pulling through into a dive. And as the engine screamed, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. She laughed inside the helmet. Not loud, not wild. just a single breath of freedom breaking through years of silence. When she landed, Earl was waiting with a grin. "You still got it," he said. Pulled off the helmet, sweat streaking her face. "I'm not ready for a Hornet." "Not yet," Earl agreed, "but you will be." Working the angles, Jake's handling the Blue Angel's side. "All you have to do is remember who you are." Looked down at her hands, still trembling from adrenaline. For years, those hands had only held tools, grease, rags, but tonight they had remembered flight. Maybe she hadn't been buried after all. Maybe she had just been waiting. But even as rediscovered herself, the walls of the conspiracy were shifting. In Washington, Admiral sat in his office at the Pentagon reviewing classified briefings. His face was calm, his suit crisp, but his eyes were calculating. Reports had crossed his desk, fragments, whispers, movement around Pensacola, a name surfacing in secure chatter, a name that should not exist. He set the file down slowly. His fingers tapped the desk once, twice, the rhythm of a man deciding who would live and who would vanish. Then he picked up the phone. "Send a team to Pensacola," he said. His voice carried no emotion, only command. "Discretion absolute. If the ghost is stirring, I want her gone for good this time." 2 days later, walked into Earl's hidden intelligence bunker, disguised as a rundown gas station on Highway 29. Jake was already there, studying glowing monitors. Leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Knows," said bluntly. "Signals traffic shows he's moving assets. Black teams, contractors, they're coming." Jake straightened. "How soon?" "Could be tonight. Could be tomorrow. He's not waiting for the exhibition to play out. He wants you dead before you touch a cockpit." Felt her pulse quicken, but her voice was calm. "Then we don't have time to prepare quietly." Earl grinned wolfish. "We never did." He pressed a button and a wall of the bunker lit up. Names, faces, connections spread across decades. Politicians, defense executives, admirals, the network that had bled the military dry. "This," Earl said, pointing, "is what they killed your father for, Jake. This is what they buried you for, and this," he taps face, "is the man holding the knife." Jake's jaw tightened. "Then we cut deeper." His eyes narrowed. "Careful, recklessness will kill you faster than." Jake looked at, "Then what's the plan?" Stared at the glowing map of corruption, the lines of betrayal weaving across the screen. Her heart pounded. Her hands itched. Her body still remembered the freedom of flight. "We hit them where they can't hide," she said. "At Gulf Coast thunder, in front of the world, I fly. You drop the evidence, and won't be able to bury it." Tilted her head. "And if you die in that cockpit?" Met her mentor's eyes. Her voice was steady. "Then I die as myself, not as a ghost." The Admiral studied her, then finally nodded. "Then it's decided." That night couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her trailer, listening to the hum of distant traffic. Shadows pressed against the walls. Every sound felt amplified, the creak of floorboards, the wind through the window frame. Her instincts screamed. She slid silently from bed, hand reaching for the pistol hidden beneath her mattress. The trailer was dark, but she moved like a predator. A soft scrape outside the window. A shadow moving where no shadow should be. They were here. Black teams, hunters. The first kick shattered the door. Men in tactical black surged inside, rifles raised, but was already moving, rolling low, firing twice. One man fell, another staggered back. She dove for cover, adrenaline surging. 8 years of hiding hadn't dulled her instincts. They had sharpened them. Survival was her only currency, and she had spent it every day. She crashed through the back window, glass exploding around her, sprinting into the dark. Bullets shredded the siding of the trailer behind her. Voices shouted. Flashlights cut through the night. She ran for the tree line, her breath ragged, her legs burning. Her lungs screamed, but she didn't stop. Not tonight. Not when ghosts were finally ready to fight back. She didn't return to the trailer. She couldn't. By dawn, the place was gone, fire consuming everything she had built as Sarah Mitchell. The life she had hidden behind turned to ash. She watched from the tree line, smoke rising into the morning sky. Her chest ached, but her face was hard. Sarah Mitchell was gone, burned, buried. All that remained was, and had unfinished business. Later at the diner slammed her hand against the table. That was warning shot. He knows you're alive. He's accelerating, which means we accelerate too. Jake leaned forward. Then we move now, no more waiting. His eyes met. You ready to fly again? His jaw tightened. The image of her burning trailer was still fresh in her mind. The years of hiding, the lives lost, Jake's father, her own name carved into stone. Yes, she said, her voice didn't shake. Get me in a Hornet. Jake exhaled, the weight of the moment clear in his eyes. He reached across the table, resting his hand on hers. They think ghosts can't fight, he said quietly. Met his gaze, her lips tightening into something between a smile and a vow. Then let's show them what ghosts can do. What does it take to reclaim the part of yourself you swore was gone forever? Is it bravery, or is it desperation? And when the world has buried you, how do you prove you were ever alive? The answer came in steel and fire. The FA-18 Super Hornet sat waiting in the hangar at Pensacola Naval Air Station, blue and gold paint gleaming under fluorescent lights. To most, it was just another jet in the Blue Angels fleet. To, it was the altar of her resurrection. She hadn't told anyone outside the circle, Earl Jake. Even Chief, the man who trusted Sarah Mitchell with everything, still believed she was only a mechanic. If he knew the truth, he'd be forced to act, and she couldn't risk his career. Not yet. Tonight was for ghosts only. Jake stood near the hangar doors, helmet tucked under his arm, watching her pace like a caged animal. You don't have to do this tonight, he said softly. You've been out of the cockpit for 8 years. We could take more time. Shot him a look. Isn't giving us time. He already tried to burn me alive. Next time it won't be a warning. Jake nodded, jaw tightening. He wanted to argue, but he knew better. He'd seen the fire in her eyes. It wasn't reckless. It was inevitable. You'll have to make it look routine, he said. If anyone suspects you're more than a mechanic, the plan collapses. Exhaled, then routine is what they'll see. She climbed the ladder, each step heavy with memory. The cockpit yawned open, familiar and foreign all at once. She lowered herself in, the seat hugging her body like a coffin she'd climbed back into. Her fingers brushed the controls, switches, levers, panels, muscle memory surged. She didn't think she knew. Helmet on, oxygen feed checked, canopy sealed. For 8 years she had lived with silence. Now the jet's hum filled her veins. Tower, this is test aircraft requesting clearance for maintenance run, Jake's voice crackled in her headset. His cover story flowed with ease practiced. He was her shield, her diversion. Clearance granted. The engines roared awake. The Hornet trembled, eager, alive. His chest tightened with every vibration. She rolled forward, onto the runway, into the night. The throttle pushed against her palm. For a second she froze. The fear clawed back. 8 years of silence screamed inside her head. What if she couldn't do it? What if the past had broken her beyond repair? But then the memory. Her first flight as a cadet. Her father's voice over the radio. Trust the sky, Cat. It's the only thing that won't lie to you. She shoved the throttle forward. The Hornet roared. The runway blurred. The wheels lifted. And was airborne. The night sky opened around her, stars sharp and merciless. The Hornet climbed, her body straining against G-forces she hadn't felt in years. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She rolled into a banking climb, pulling tight, every instinct snapping awake. A barrel roll, a snap turn. The maneuvers flowed like water. Her body screamed, but her soul remembered. Below, Jake's voice came through. How's it feel? Smiled through gritted teeth. like I never left. But it wasn't just flight, it was resurrection. The ghost of wasn't just alive, she was blazing across the sky, undeniable, unstoppable. She pushed the Hornet higher, faster. The Gulf shimmered beneath her, silver under the moon. Pensacola slept below, unaware a dead woman had risen above them. For a moment she wasn't broken, she wasn't erased, she was herself. And it terrified her. Because with every second she flew, the risk grew sharper. If anyone saw her, if anyone recognized her maneuvers, if hunters caught even a whisper, everything would burn. She forced the Hornet back down, circling, lining up for landing. The runway lights stretched ahead. Her hands trembled on the controls. Wheels kissed asphalt. The roar faded, the jet slowed. When the canopy opened, Jake was waiting at the ladder. His eyes burned with something between awe and grief. "You're back," he whispered. Climbed down, pulling off the helmet. Her hair stuck to her skin, sweat dripping, lungs still burning. "No," she said quietly. "Not yet, but I will be." The next morning, Jake stood before his squadron in the Blue Angels briefing room. Sat in the back, coveralls smudged, blending into the mechanics as always. To them, she was Sarah Mitchell. To him, she was the ghost he was protecting. 3 days until Gulf Coast thunder, Jake said. His tone was crisp, commanding. "We'll run full formation drills, double inspections, no errors tolerated. The world will be watching. We do this right or we don't do it at all." The pilots nodded, determined, professional, but saw the strain in Jake's posture. The fire that kept him steady was also burning him hollow. Later, when the room emptied, she caught him staring at the wall where his father's photo hung. Captain Michael Iceman, Medal of Honor, lost in 2016. Jake's voice was low. "I've spent my whole career chasing a ghost, trying to prove my father wasn't crazy, trying to live up to him. And now you're here. And it feels like everything he sacrificed wasn't for nothing." She stepped closer. "But it cost you, didn't it?" Jake's jaw tightened, his voice cracked. "I've never let myself slow down, never allowed weakness, never grieved, because if I did, I was afraid I'd never start again." His chest ached. She knew that wound. She had lived it for 8 years. "Weakness isn't grief, Jake. It's pretending you don't have it." His eyes met hers, raw, unguarded. For a moment the soldier's mask slipped. For a moment he was just a son. "Then maybe," he whispered, "I'm weaker than I thought." Reached out, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "No, you're just human, and that's what scares them most." Meanwhile, and Earl were weaving their own threads. In a darkened bunker, fed files into encrypted drives, photographs, contracts, evidence spanning decades. "When this drops," said, "it'll rock Washington, but only if flight happens at the same time. Spectacle forces eyes, eyes force accountability." Earl grunted, sliding another file across. "And won't sit still. He'll tighten his net, try to crush her before she flies." His gaze hardened. "Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance." That chance nearly vanished the next night. Was walking back from the hangar when she felt it, the wrong silence. Too still, too heavy. Her instincts screamed. She ducked behind a parked truck just as a black SUV rolled past, windows tinted, headlights dimmed. It circled the lot once, twice before pulling away. She exhaled slowly. Hunters weren't gone, they were watching, waiting. She couldn't keep pretending. Sarah Mitchell was dead, and if didn't rise now, there would be no rising at all. The final rehearsal came 2 nights before Gulf Coast thunder. Jake arranged it under the cover of darkness, logged as routine maintenance checks. But there was nothing routine about it. The hangar was sealed. Only Earl, Jake, and were inside. The Hornet gleamed under floodlights, waiting. Suited up, every strap, every buckle, every motion carried the weight of the past. Her hands didn't shake this time. She climbed in, canopy down, engines alive. Jake's voice crackled in her headset. "Show us you're ready." And she did. The Hornet screamed into the night, climbing, diving, rolling through maneuvers that most pilots wouldn't dare after years away. But wasn't most pilots. She was the ghost of the Blue Angels. When she landed, silence hung in the hangar. Arms were crossed, but her eyes gleamed. Earl was grinning like a wolf, and Jake looked at her like he'd just seen history reborn. "You're ready," said simply. Pulled off the helmet. Sweat soaked her hair, but her eyes burned steady. "No," she said, "we're ready." Because this wasn't just her fight anymore. It was all of theirs. And in 2 days, the world would learn that ghosts could fly. What do you fear most on the eve of redemption? Failure, exposure, or betrayal from the one place you thought was safe? For all three shadows circled her that night. The sun dipped beyond the gulf, casting Pensacola in a wash of dying gold. On the flight line, mechanics scrambled over gleaming Hornets, polishing, inspecting, preparing for Gulf Coast thunder. Crowds were already arriving in town. Hotels filled. Streets choked with traffic. By morning, 50,000 people would line the bay to watch the Blue Angels soar. And if plan held, they would also watch a ghost rise from the dead. Moved through the hangar like Sarah Mitchell always had, quiet, competent, unnoticed. But inside, her heart pounded. Tomorrow the world would see her. Tomorrow the lie she had lived for 8 years would burn away. But the night had its own plans. In the bunker spread the final layers of the operation across the table. USB drives, evidence folders, contingency instructions. Earl hunched nearby, cigarette smoke curling around him. Jake sat opposite, eyes burning but tired. "This is everything," said. "Contracts, transfers, photographs. When this hits, the media won't be able to ignore it. The question isn't whether it's true, it's whether they can bury it before the public sees it. That's why your flight is non-negotiable. Without spectacle, truth dies in silence." Nodded, but her chest tightened. "And if makes his move before then?" "He already has," said grimly. "His people are in town, contractors, cleaners. They're blending with tourists, waiting for the signal." Earl slammed a folder shut. "Then let 'em wait. They'll see a ghost in the sky before they ever get their hands on her." But notice something else. Jake's silence. His eyes locked not on the files, but on his father's old flight patch sitting on the table. "Jake," she said softly, "talk to me." He looked up, voice low. "If this fails, if something happens tomorrow, it won't just kill you. It'll kill my father's truth. All of it will vanish." Reached across the table, fingers brushing his hand. "Then we don't fail." Her words were steady, but her heart knew better. Failure wasn't just possible. It was circling them like a predator. That night walked the flight line alone. The Hornet stood in silence, lined like monuments under floodlights. She stopped at number 3, her jet. Her hand touched the nose, cold, unforgiving. She closed her eyes. 8 years of hiding, 8 years of silence. Tomorrow it ended, one way or another. A voice broke the quiet. "Beautiful, aren't they?" She spun, hand instinctively brushing the pistol at her hip. But the man who stepped from the shadows wasn't a stranger. "Chief." Not the admiral, but the chief mechanic who had trusted her all these years. His face was weary, lined with years of service. His voice was low. "Sarah, or should I say?" Her chest froze. "How long have you known?" she whispered. Exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Longer than I let myself admit. The way you read the jets, the way you carried yourself. I saw in you, but I told myself it was coincidence. Until now." His throat tightened. "And what are you going to do with that?" The chief's eyes glistened. "Do you have any idea what it's like to keep a secret like that? To know one of your people is living 2 lives, and to pray you're wrong because the truth could destroy you both." Tears burned behind her eyes. "I never wanted to drag you into this." Stepped closer. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Then tell me it's worth it. Tell me that if I keep your secret, it won't cost me my family, my career, everything I've built." Swallowed hard. It's not about me, it's about all of us, about the truth they buried, about the people they killed to keep it buried. He studied her face, searching. Finally, he exhaled. Then you'd better not fail tomorrow, because if you do, we all go down. And then he walked away, leaving her trembling in the floodlight glow. But the deepest betrayal wasn't his. It came later in the bunker. Had stepped out to make a call. Earl was digging through files. Jake sat alone, staring at his father's photo again. His face was pale, his hands clenched. "Jake," asked, her voice gentle. He didn't look up, his voice cracked. "I can't do it." Her stomach dropped. "Do what?" "This plan," he said, finally lifting his gaze. "I can't put you up there tomorrow. If you die, it's on me. If takes his shot in the sky, it's my fault." Shook her head. "No, it's on the machine that killed your father, not you." But Jake's voice rose, breaking. "Don't you get it? I've already lost him. I can't lose you too." The words cut her, not because of what they meant for the mission, but because of what they revealed. Jake wasn't just a soldier in this fight. He wasn't just his father's son. Somewhere along the line, she had become more than a ghost to him. And that terrified him more than any conspiracy. "Jake," she whispered, "if we don't do this, none of it matters. Your father's truth dies, my life stays erased. Wins forever, do you want that?" His jaw trembled, his eyes filled. For the first time, the fire in him flickered. "No," he whispered, "but I don't want to bury another ghost." She stepped closer, her voice breaking too. "Then don't bury me, stand beside me, because tomorrow I rise, and I need you there." The silence between them was raw, electric, fragile. Then Jake's fist slammed the table. "Fine," he said, voice shaking. "But if you fall tomorrow, I swear I'll take down with my bare hands." At dawn, the town stirred. The smell of jet fuel drifted across the bay. Families lined fences, children waving flags, vendors selling shirts. The carnival of Gulf Coast thunder was alive. But in the shadows, men blended with the crowd. Sunglasses, earpieces, weapons hidden under jackets. And inside a Pentagon office, Admiral watched live feeds from surveillance drones. His lips curled into a cold smile. "Let the ghost rise," he murmured. "I'll make sure she never lands." In the locker room, pulled on her flight suit. The patches felt heavy on her chest. Her reflection in the mirror didn't show Sarah Mitchell anymore. It showed the woman who had flown with the Blue Angels, the woman they thought was dead. Her hands shook as she zipped up. She closed her eyes, whispering a vow. "For my grandfather, for Jake's father, for everyone you buried." When she opened them, her reflection stared back, hard and steady. Tomorrow had come, and was ready to face it. What does it feel like to fly when the entire world believes you're dead? When every second in the sky could be your last, and yet those same seconds could rewrite history? For the answer came with the roar of engines. The morning of Gulf Coast thunder dawned bright and mercilessly blue. Not a cloud in the sky. Flags whipped in the salt breeze as 50,000 spectators packed the shoreline, their cheers rising in a chorus of anticipation. Vendors shouted, children laughed, jets thundered in distant warm-ups. To the crowd, it was spectacle. It was Judgment Day. She stood on the flight line in her flight suit, helmet tucked under her arm, the Blue Angels insignia gleaming on the Hornets beside her. The world saw Sarah Mitchell, mechanic, slipping quietly between planes, but the truth was ready to erupt. Jake approached, already suited, visor down. His hand brushed her shoulder, a brief tether in the storm. "This is it," he said quietly so no one else could hear. "No turning back." Nodded, jaw tight. "Then let's make history." In the Pentagon, Admiral leaned over the surveillance feeds. High-definition drones tracked every angle of Pensacola Beach. His face was calm, but his eyes were predators. "She's here," he murmured. "I want confirmation." An aide handed him a still-frame capture in her flight suit, helmet under arm. Lips curled into a cold smile. Good, he said. Then this ends today. He turned to his covert operations commander. Deploy the asset. The crowd won't know the difference between an accident and an execution. The commander hesitated. Sir, if she dies during the performance, it risks exposure. Cut him off, voice sharp as a blade. Exposure is only a risk if she lives long enough to speak. Do it. Back on the line, strapped into her Hornet, her hands moved steady now. No hesitation, no tremor. The canopy sealed, muting the roar of the crowd to a muffled hum. She exhaled into the oxygen mask. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. This is it, fly or vanish. The engines ignited, vibrating through her chest. The Hornet rolled forward, falling into formation with Jake and the rest of the team. To the spectators, it was just another routine. It was resurrection. The tower's voice crackled in her headset. Blue Angels cleared for takeoff. She pushed the throttle forward. The runway blurred, the Hornet lifted. And soared. The crowd erupted as the diamond formation roared over the Gulf, blue and gold slicing across the sky. Cameras flashed. Children screamed in delight. Announcers filled the air with practiced awe. But's focus was razor-sharp. Every roll, every climb, every split-second adjustment flowed through her as if the 8 years had never passed. Muscle memory, instinct, ghosts returning to flesh. Jake's voice crackled in her ear, looking good. Her lips curved faintly. He didn't call her Sarah anymore. Not here, not now. Just don't blink, she replied. The formation peeled into a diamond roll, jets slicing through blue like dancers in perfect rhythm. The crowd gasped, pointing skyward. And then broke formation. The announcer's voice faltered, and it looks like number 3 is. The Hornet rolled inverted, climbing hard, peeling away from the team. The crowd erupted in confusion. Gasps, cheers, murmurs. Jet streaked skyward, a lone arrow against the blue. The announcer scrambled. Ladies, and a special addition to today's performance. But wasn't performing for them. She was declaring herself to the world. Jake whispered in her ear. His voice shook with awe. You're back. In Washington's eyes narrowed. The feed showed her jet breaking formation, climbing solo. Now, he snapped. His commander keyed the signal. On the shoreline, one of his covert operatives lifted a shoulder-mounted weapon from a concealed case. Tourists screamed, scattering, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of jets overhead. The missile streaked skyward. Warning alarms blared. Her instincts screamed. Missile lock, Jake's voice roared. Her hands moved before thought. She rolled hard, flares exploding from the Hornet's belly. The missile sliced past, detonating harmlessly in the open sky. The crowd gasped, half thinking it was part of the show. But knew better. They're here, she spat into the radio. Sent them. Jake's voice was sharp, panicked. Stay on routine. Don't let them know you survived. His chest heaved, adrenaline flooding. For a split second, she wanted to break formation, to scream the truth into the radio, to tell the world. But discipline held. She rolled back into position, flying smooth as though nothing had happened. To the crowd, the flare burst looked like spectacle. It was failure disguised as precision. His fist slammed the desk. Again, don't let her walk away. But the operative on the ground had already been tackled. Earl Washington, hidden among the crowd, pressed a pistol to the man's temple, snarling. Not today. The continued, loops, rolls, tight formations. The world cheered, oblivious, but inside the cockpit's chest burned. They had tried to kill her in front of 50,000 people. And still she flew. Finally the team landed. The crowd roared, surging forward against fences, waving flags and banners. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Climbed from the cockpit, helmet under her arm. Her chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. Sweat streaked her face. And then she stopped hiding. She pulled off the oxygen mask, pulled off the helmet. Her face was clear, visible, broadcast on jumbotrons, captured by every camera, every phone. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some cheered, some froze in shock. Because was supposed to be dead. But here she stood, alive. Jake was beside her, jaw tight, eyes blazing. And Earl pushed through the crowd, shoving USB drives into waiting journalists' hands. Evidence spread like wildfire. Photos, contracts, records. The truth was no longer theirs. It belonged to the world now. Raised her chin, staring straight into the sea of cameras. Her voice, though quiet, cut through the roar. My name is, 8 years ago they erased me. Today I take my name back. The crowd erupted. And in Washington, Admiral watched the feeds collapse under the weight of evidence, media storms igniting in real time, his empire crumbling, his face, once untouchable, now plastered across headlines in red. His hand trembled with fury, but's voice still echoed in his ears. I take my name back. As night fell, fireworks exploded over Pensacola. Families cheered, children waved sparklers. The world celebrated a show they would never forget. But stood apart on the flight line, helmet under her arm, staring at the Gulf. Jake joined her, silent for a moment, then said, "You did it. You're free." Her lips curved faintly. Freedom isn't free, Jake, we both know that. His eyes softened. Then what now? She looked skyward, where the last traces of smoke from fireworks curled into the night. Now, she whispered, we see who still has the courage to stand when the lies burn away. What happens after the truth finally breaks free, after the ghost steps into the light and the lies collapse under their own weight? For the silence after the roar was the hardest part. In the days after Gulf Coast thunder, the world trembled. News outlets ran 24-hour coverage. Headlines screamed her name. Blue Angel's pilot found alive. The ghost of Pentagon conspiracy exposed. Clips of her flight replayed endlessly. The solo climb, the inverted roll, the flare burst mistaken for spectacle. Then the landing, the helmet pulled free, the words spoken to the cameras. My name is. 8 years ago they erased me. Today I take my name back. It was history, burned into the world in real time. But history had a cost. Admiral never saw a trial. Within 48 hours, investigators stormed his Pentagon office. Evidence already in the press left no room for cover-ups. His assets crumbled, contractors flipped, politicians fled. He disappeared before arrest. Some said he fled overseas. Others whispered darker endings. Didn't care. Justice was never about his face in a courtroom. It was about truth no longer buried. Still at night she felt him, the shadow of his hand on her shoulder, the voice that had ordered her death. Ghosts didn't die easy. In Pensacola she became both icon and target. Reporters camped outside the base. Veterans wrote letters thanking her. Families sent flowers. Strangers called her hero. But the word sat heavy on her chest. Hero? She didn't feel like one. Not when she thought of the bodies buried by some machine. Not when she thought of the 8 stolen years. Not when she remembered the fear that still pulsed in her veins. At night in the quiet of the barracks she whispered to herself, I'm not a hero, I'm just not dead. And sometimes that had to be enough. Jake carried his own weight. Reporters painted him as the son who avenged his father, the man who shielded from the fire. Cameras caught his stoic face beside hers, microphones shoving forward with questions he rarely answered. But behind closed doors he was tired. The fire that had driven him burned low now, replaced with something, grief, finally unchained. One night found him alone in the hangar, staring at his father's photo pinned to the wall. His eyes were wet, his fists clenched. I thought this would fix it, he whispered. Bringing him justice, proving he wasn't crazy, exposing the truth, but it doesn't bring him back, he's still gone. Stepped closer, her voice soft. Truth doesn't heal grief, Jake, it just makes room for it. His breath shuddered. Then why does it still hurt? She touched his arm lightly. Because you loved him, and hurt is the proof that it was real. He turned, eyes meeting hers, searching. For the first time since the skis, he let the mask fall. And what about us? What do we do with all this? The silence between them was heavy but not hopeless. His voice was steady. We live. That's the one thing couldn't take from us. And for the first time in years, Jake allowed himself to cry. It was harder to read. She moved through debriefings with precision, her sharp mind cataloging every consequence. The Pentagon launched investigations. Congressional hearings loomed. Careers toppled like dominoes. But when she spoke to in private, her words carried steel. You've ripped the mask off, that makes you dangerous. To them, to the people who built their lives on silence. They'll call you hero today. Tomorrow they'll call you a liability. Be ready. Nodded, she had no illusions. The truth had freed her, but freedom was fragile. His eyes softened just slightly. But you did what no one else could. You carried the burden and gave it back to the world. That matters. Swallowed hard. Then why does it feel like I lost more than I won? Sighed, because you did. That's the price of survival. Earl Washington was less solemn. He watched the storm with a grin, cigarette dangling from his lips, muttering about finally getting what was coming. But even his laughter carried edges of fatigue. They'll make movies about you, Cat, he said one evening, half joking. Paint you like a saint. Just don't let 'em forget you were human. Smiled faintly. I think they'll remind me every day. But the heaviest moment came alone. 1 week after the show, visited the memorial at Arlington, the marble wall where her name was carved. 1989-2015. She stood before it, flight suit crisp, hands trembling. 8 years. 8 years of strangers passing this stone, touching her name, whispering prayers for a ghost. Now she stared at her own grave. Her throat ached, words caught in her chest. Finally she whispered, You kept me alive even when I was, but I don't belong here anymore. Her hand touched the cold letters one last time. And then she stepped back. Because had chosen life. That night, sitting on the beach with Jake, she let the Gulf wind wash over her. Fireworks cracked in the distance from some lingering celebration. Children's laughter carried faintly. Jake leaned back, arms draped over his knees. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if you never came back, if you stayed Sarah Mitchell forever? His eyes stayed on the horizon. Every day, but hiding isn't living, it's just waiting to die. Jake nodded slowly, and now? She exhaled, long and quiet. Now I'm not waiting anymore. The waves crashed softly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then whispered, more to herself than him. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts, and the world is left to wonder how it found the strength. Jake turned, studying her in the moonlight, and for the first time he smiled. Because wasn't a ghost anymore. She was alive. And sometimes that was the bravest act of all. But inside she knew, tomorrow morning might be the beginning of the end. The day came. The air buzzed with anticipation as 6 FA-18 Super Hornets screamed into Pensacola skis. They landed in perfect formation, gleaming blue and gold beneath a rising sun. Sarah stood in the hangar, watching, every muscle taut. They were beautiful, predators, jewels, dreams she once lived, dreams stolen from her. The lead jet stopped, its canopy opened, and Jake climbed down, young, sharp-eyed, carrying himself with the same presence, the same energy his father once had. Sarah's throat closed. She remembered that last night in 2016, the last words Captain spoke before his death, the warning, the promise. And now here was his son, standing in front of her. You must be Mitchell, Jake said, helmet tucked under his arm. Sarah saluted, the motion muscle memory she hadn't practiced in 8 years. Sarah Mitchell, maintenance supervisor. Welcome to Pensacola, sir. returned the salute, but his eyes lingered, studying her, searching. Sarah kept her face still, kept her voice even, but inside, everything she had buried for 8 years began to stir. Because the past wasn't gone. It had just landed in Pensacola.